All right, let's look at my latest idea for a strange little video. This one is going to be talking about which tournaments had the strongest Final Eight players. Let's talk about what that means. It's just going to be looking at the Final Eight players in every tournament, not who won within that Final Eight, just who were the top eight, who were the quarterfinalists, and we'll look at the tournaments I ranked the top 15 Final Eights. I am recording this as Triad Wars 15 has reached the quarterfinals. I don't know, what happened because I can't see into the future. For you, it's future, or for you, it's past. For me, it's future. Time is an illusion. But I wanted to see how it stacked up. I thought it looked pretty impressive, and I wanted to place it historically. So that gave me this concept. What is this? This doesn't rank winners at all. I've done some winner rankings in the past. Generally speaking, Seto's Triad Wars 8, Sujiro's SE Eris, Delial's either Triad Wars 6 or Irvine, depending on how I do it. Yojimbo's Quistis, or he's something else that's up there. There's a bunch of tournaments like that that regularly recur at the top of lists of that I try to do. This is a different list. This is not saying who won. This is saying which tournaments had really great top eights. Now, of course, winning a really great top eight is very impressive, but that doesn't mean it's the most impressive run, right? If you beat, say, me, if you beat me in round two, like, you could have a great run, but the top eight might not look that impressive. Like, you did great, right? You beat Yojimbo or whoever, insert whatever name you want. So this is not the same as who won the best tournament. This is just like, you look at that final eight and you're like, wow, that is a lot of talent there. I thought it would be fun to look at. So that's where we're at. Um, yep, I do have a dumb methodology here because I always talk about my methodologies. This one is I started by just taking, okay, let's just average the ELO ratings of all players in the quarterfinals. And this is some real strengths, right? If a player wasn't good for a while but then gets really good, it's not going to say, okay, if they were in the quarterfinals when they weren't very good, we're not giving credit for the fact that they got good later, right? It's gonna measure changes in players over time. So some lists you might look at one quarterfinals and say, well, that looks a lot better than this other one, but maybe all the players weren't yet as good as they got, or they were past their peaks and it's not as good as it looks. And ELO, because it's going to change for each player over time, adjusting to their results, it's going to be a nice way of saying, okay, this is more impressive than it looks. All these players were peaking, or this isn't quite as good as it looks. But rating inflation definitely has happened. And if you just do that, you end up with a list of basically entirely tournaments after 2008 and mostly coming substantially later in the site's period. And I don't think that's right. I think there were some really excellent top eights quite early, and they deserve credit. So I did a few features to normalize for this. One was I looked at kind of what was the best that had been done so far, right? A tournament might have the highest rating of any tournament to ever happen, and 30 tournaments later, it's no longer number one. Another tournament may have a higher score than it in terms of rating, but is like number 22 by the time it happened. This one's number 24, but it was number one once, and I think that means something, right? And especially given that ratings do inflate. So I made some adjustments here, and I tried to strike some kind of balance that seemed reasonable. It did end up being clearly biased towards later tournaments, especially starting 2008 and onwards. Only one tournament before 2008 makes the top 10, and only three make the top 15, which, you know, it's about a little under a third of tournaments happened before then, or around a third. And so it's getting a fifth of the slots in the top 15 and a tenth of the slots in the top 10. So it's not fully represented. But I also think, like, you look at players, you look at the early players. Doc Evil didn't play that long. So the best kind of regular players of the, pre 2008 days are pretty clearly Kamikaze, Sujiro, and Seto, though he mostly peaked 2008 onwards. So mostly Kamikaze and Sujiro. And you compare them to Seto and Delial taking over in 2007, 2008, and there's just a whole different level of like consistency and dominance that you see with Seto and Delial. Like, if it wasn't for Doc Evil's short run, oh, I forgot Cookie. Like, the greats of the early days are Cookie, Kamikaze, and Sujiro. And then Delial and Seto, I think, surpass them by a clear margin. And ratings are inflating, but also they are winning more. Their ratings should be higher. And then along come myself, Yojimbo, Slash of Time, MC, Nightwish. Oh, and Koner. Koner also is hitting around when Delial and Seto do, and is also more dominant than players had been before. And so you get kind of the trio of Cookie, Sujiro, Kamikaze, I think just generally surpassed by Delial, Seto, and Koner. And then you get this flood after that in the 2009 to 11 range, or 8 to 11, somewhere around there, that are just people winning more consistently. And so the ratings should be higher. And maybe it inflates more, and I tried to do some adjustments, but I think overall this felt like the right ratio to me. So let's get into the top 15. In 15th, and I'm showing the quarterfinals in each, and I'll have a kind of fun fact about each quarterfinal thing, or try to say something interesting. Um, this was a fun tournament because Addy knocked out Yojimbo in a big upset, and this was a 7-rounder. Addy had a really good run to make the quarterfinals here. I know Addy's been playing really good Open, like of recent in 2023, but he was very much not known as an Open player then, at least to my knowledge. And this was a really awesome run where he took out big threats. Um, we have Kona versus Smokes was up versus MC, Nightwish versus Addy, and Focus versus Kazik. Um, Addy and Focus look like the weaker players there. Kazik is a few years removed from his finals. Not as good as he was a few years before, but still very good. And Focus and Addy are good players. It's a very strong field to start us off. Turns out top eights are usually pretty strong, and our top 15 top eights are going to be a very strong field. In 14th, we have Kuros in 2004. This is the earliest tournament to appear on the list. Dream Virus is a very early player, regularly making the quarterfinals. Kefka is an early finalist. DA2 I'm not familiar with. Ulti is a very early 2-time finalist. There's a point in time when you'd have to have Ulti in your top 5 players of all time, I think, for tournaments. Mafi Josie is another one where there's definitely an early point in time, but it lasts longer because Mafi Josie just makes tons of semifinals early on. And C17 is a really renowned early player. Titus, good player for PL. Not, probably the second weakest in this field, but it's a very strong field. And Doc Evil is, of course, I think, some people would still consider him the GOAT, but I would say the GOAT until Seto and Delial come along. And, still has a case today. So very strong field for 2004, and you could definitely put this higher on your list, though I'd say there's the top end's very good, but the middle to bottom of this is not as good as some of the fields we'll see. Squall, we have 2010. This Kamikaze run I have ranked as, I believe I've done at least one ranking that had it as the best tournament win of all time. And the field's really strong. We have Focus, who I think we already saw once, showing that, not a weak player making multiple of these quarterfinals. We have a nice run by Fury here. And then we have MC. We have Blizzard's best run. He beat someone really good. Maybe he knocked out Koner on the way versus Smokes. And we also have one of the great rivalries. I think Seto, Delial, and Yojimbo was up are probably the 2 best tournament rivalries ever. And you see one of them here. And my fun fact about this one is Kamikaze is a meanie. I was so proud of myself making the finals of this tournament. I had such a hard bracket, and Kamikaze absolutely destroyed me. One of the reasons I think 2010 is just arguably, probably the peak year of tournament triple triad is we're going to see it a whole bunch of times on this list, but both Kamikaze and Sujiro come back around 2010. So you really, and Cookie's still playing. So you have the super greats of the early era. Seto and Delial are still playing, and so is Koner. You have the super greats of kind of the early middle. And then you have all the, middle greats coming into their own, like the Polish brothers. You see MC here, Yojimbo, and myself. And I think that just, and Sir Smokes, and that just leads to incredibly strong fields. I think you see how many times 2010 appears on this list. 2010 is a fascinating year. In 12th, we have 2015. If I didn't do era adjustments, this could have been in the top 5, borderline top 5. I mean, easily placed top 5 is a bit of an exaggeration, but it could have come 4th or 5th or something. We have Akiyama versus Cookie. the incredibly strong Chickeny versus Borchardt, Yojimbo versus Smokes, and the Patriot versus Delial. Pat was doing really well in tournaments at this point, and yeah, very strong field. Really high average rating here. Um, I think this is about the right place for it. I think this is a sign that my era adjustments did well, but this is a very, very strong field. Oops, went the wrong way. In 11th, we have Tifa. This is our, I guess, second tournament from the early days and the second earliest one we will see. We have the incredible Doc Evil versus, again, Dream Virus, one of the greats of the early days. Sujiro, as I've said, I think there's a big three of the early days, at least for players that played more than a few tournaments, and Sujiro's in that big three. Karmazin is in the Doc Evil category of just never loses, or played very few tournaments and won one and lost in the other here to Sujiro, actually. But like just this incredibly high win rate and clearly amazing player. In the bottom half, a little weaker, but Lionheart's a monster. Beastay is the only player to have won a tournament while losing on the way. He lost to Lionheart, but Lionheart withdrew, and Beastay went on to beat Zwinukin in the semis and Doc Evil in the finals. He's the only player to ever beat Doc Evil, making this one of the, really historically important tournaments. And if he had lost that game, we'd probably just still be calling Doc Evil the clear GOAT. And this is a great field to have won. Doc Evil, Sujiro, and Karmazin, Lionheart, and Beastay all in the same quarterfinals. Like, Dream Virus and Soaps are the 6th and 7th best players here. It's a great field. In 10th place, we have another 2010 tournament. This is the third entry from 2010. I'm not even sure if it'll be the last. We have Sujiro versus Piggyman, Turds versus Delial. As I said, Sujiro and Kazi both coming back in exactly 2010. Makes it even stronger than it would be otherwise. Turds versus Delial. Turd's not in a super good phase for him, but still, of course, very strong. Slug versus Nightwish. Chickeny versus Great Sephiroth. Chickeny also not yet quite hit his own, but you can see this field's nuts. Slug had a great run to get to the quarterfinals. Obviously, he looks like the odd man out here, but he did great to get there. And yeah, this is a. I think just skimming it, this looks to me like the clear most impressive field yet. But again, all of these are great, and a different one might pop out to you. In 9th, we have Triad Wars 15, the ongoing tournament. We have Delial versus Was Up, Vid versus Akiyama, Turds versus Midas, Cliffy versus Kaus. Cliffy seems like the odd man out here, right? Everyone else here, like if we add up the winners, Delial is 6 tournaments won, I have 6, Vid is 2, Akiyama is 1, Kaus is 1, Turds is 2. What does that add up to? 18 tournaments won. Midas has 3 finals. And yeah, it'll be very funny if Cliffy makes it any further. Go Cliffy. We're all rooting for you. But like, this is such a strong field. Yeah. This field kind of inspired me to look at comparing it to previous quarterfinals, and it came 9th. Just to say, the site's pretty strong right now. It's really tough to win tournament games. In 8th, we have SE Eris. This is a very interesting one. This is our third and final game from before 2008, and it's the only one to make the top 10. We have Kamikaze versus Sujiro, which I think in 2006 is arguably the best match you can have. There's a case that Seto or Cookie, but now that Doc Evil and Karmazin are done, this is about the greatest match you could have. And we have Seto versus Kefka. Kefka, an early finalist. I thought for a while he might be the best player to never win. I think that's now pretty clearly Chickeny, Piggyman second. Kefka has fallen down the list a bit, but very much in that conversation. Omega Weapon was an early extremely solid player. Necro is maybe a name of Gambit X, another very good player. And Bren has just won Triad Wars 3 and is on a really strong streak. One of the great streaks, shows up in my best streaks videos. And Jadat makes the finals here and is, of course, one of the best non-winners as well. I think there's a case. This is, I think, the clear best of the early days fields. I think, maybe you can argue for the one with Doc Evil, Karmazin, and Sujiro. I would lean with this one. I've also considered that this is a case for being the best tournament ever won. Sujiro goes on to win. Yeah, I think if you're gonna say I'm underrating the early days, this tournament is a good pick for this might be one of the best ones won. Or this might be one of the best top 8 fields. Now, Omega Weapon and Necro are very good rather than great, and that might drop it off enough that it isn't. But yeah, very strong tournament. In 7th, we have Triad where 7 was up versus Koner, Serenity versus Delial, Tezuka versus Saber, and Torin versus Nightwish. Saber and Torin seem like the weaker ones there, but Saber actually really high win rate in her very few tournaments played, and Torin went on to win a closed tournament as the Crow. I didn't remember this at all. I was opening the bracket. The finals had E in the rule set. I don't remember that at all. I played it, and I always hated E. Maybe this is when it started. Maybe this was the tournament that started me just despising E. We're trying to get over that. Quarterfinals coming up would be, oh, it's going to be tough. Anywho, let's move on. In 6th, we have SE Sid. Oh, was that another one? That was from 2009. And this is also from 2009. The second from 2009 to make the list. These tournaments actually happened right in a row. This 2008-10 run is so strong for the site. We have Turds versus Great Sephiroth, Koner versus Piggyman, Sir Smokes first was up, Slash of Time versus Reeker. Reeker is the odd man out here, but still in my top 100 all time. This might be the best we've seen yet. Eris is up there, and I really liked the tournament that came 9th or 10th that I talked about. But this is very strong. I mean, these are all very strong. I'm running out of things to say. Hopefully, it's still interesting. Let's go to 5th. This tournament kind of broke my heart. Slash beat me in the semifinals. 5th, Irvine. We have Cookie versus Serenity. Serenity is coming off just having won TTAC 6. Cookie is, of course, a two-time winner at this point. I think Kaus wrote an article this year that had Cookie second place for GOAT after Doc Evil. We haven't talked about Cookie much, but Cookie's case is great. He's kind of funny because he was great in 2004, then really shaky in 05, then great in 06, then shaky in 07, and then really good again in 08. He's good every even year. Though he just won SC Zidane in 2023, so that throws everything off. But, he got time scrambled when the site went down for a bit. Was up versus Kaus Debonair. This is my breakout tournament. I'm not yet super strong, but I'm getting there. And Kaus is, of course, as we've talked about, just very consistently very, very strong. Have we talked about that? We might not have yet, but it's the case, and I think people know it. And then we get Seto, Delial, and Jadot, obviously all super strong. Any tournament with Seto and Delial in it in 2008 making the quarterfinals is just so much ahead of the pack. And then Sephiroth may appear to be the odd man out here. I actually have Sephiroth in my top 50 all time. He's not great Sephiroth. He was a short-time player around 2007, 8, or 8, 9. Didn't play that many tournaments. Really high win rate. Played like the evidence we have suggests like about the win rate Lionheart put up, but played a bit more. Lionheart didn't play many tournaments. Doesn't have the kind of legend or mystique of Lionheart. Lionheart has clan stuff and other reasons people think he's great. But yeah, Sephiroth put up a really impressive record. Very much just a weaker version of Great Sephiroth in style and like speed of play. But it turns out being a weaker version of Great Sephiroth is still a tremendous player. What I think is interesting is Irvine, TW7, and Sid happened in a row in that order, and they also place in a row here 5th through 7th, though a different order, because Irvine happened first, and here I rank it highest of the three, and not quite the same order. 2008 to 10 is, I think, when the site had the kind of strongest collection of players. And as I said, this is the first tournament where, and one of only, I think, 2, where all 8 players are in my top 50 of all time. With Sephiroth being the one barely there, and I've done other versions of my top 50 where Sephiroth didn't make top 50, but my current list, my formula I'm now committed to, does have him top 50. In 4th place, we have Triad Wars 14 from 2022. This is to say, the return has a lot of really strong players. We have Seto versus Smokes, Akiyama versus DJ, Turds versus Piggyman, and was up versus Tezuka. DJ's not in my top 50, but he's in my top 100, and he's very good despite not having played too many tournaments. In 3rd place, we have Rufus. So there's a big jump to the top 3 by the rating scores. And you might eyeball this and not think there should be that big a jump. And I think the adjustment should be a lot of these players were around their peak ratings when this happened. This isn't peak Delhi. Peak Delhi's like '08 and then again more like 2014. So this is not a low point, but a relatively low point for Delhi. But Patriot, Ray Emanator, Piggy Man, myself, we're all MC, and MC and Nightwish are both coming off great years with their peak ratings. There's a lot of people here with basically their peak ratings during this tournament. And so while this looks very strong, it might not look like it stands out above some recent fields we've seen. But if you consider that this is a much higher rate of these people being at their absolute peaks, then I think it makes sense why it would place so clearly third by the formula I used. Second place, we have Triad Wars 8. This is also often my pick for the best tournament ever won. We have Nightwish versus Great Sephiroth and Seto versus Delial being in the same half of the bracket. I think has to be the best quartet we've seen. The other half looks relatively weak, but Koner versus Steve, this is peak Steve. 2010 Steve is really strong, and Dork versus MC. You got both Polish brothers. You got Seto Delial and Great Sephiroth. It's three. I mean, this is 6 top 10 players all time out of 8, and the other 2 are top 100 players. This very strong field. Came slightly ahead of third, though first was actually a decent margin away. So if you've been following along, I don't know if you've kept tournaments in your head as like this might be it. If you won one or went deep, that's probably just the way human psychology works. Like, what if it's that one? And only for a few of you will it be that one. But the first winner was top winner pretty clearly. It is Essie Nanaki, 2012. You get the Polish brothers, you get Was Up, you get Slash of Time, you get Vid, Kamikaze, Sir Smokes. D is my lowest rated player in the field, and I have him like 23rd all time. Not only is this the second one where everyone's in my top 50, this is the only tournament where every top 8 player is in my top 25. Every top 8 player here is a tournament winner. That should have been my note here. This is the only tournament where all 8 quarterfinalists are tournament winners. In fact, except for Sir Smokes, they all were at the time already tournament winners, and Smokes would become one within 7 months of this tournament, 8 months, something like that, of this tournament, and was already, very strong, like despite not having the win under his belt yet. So, yeah, I think this was pretty clearly first and just the strongest quarterfinal bracket we've seen. Maybe someday we'll top it, but incredible field. Which are actually the best? I thought there were 5 that kind of popped out to me. There was a 6th this time that came around 10th, but I've now forgotten what it was. I think Eris is the standout of the early years. It's not as I think in the end it's not as good as the ones we see later, but it is the first one that really popped out to me as excellent. I would put Irvine higher than I had on the list. I think you just look at that field. Like, I'm not rated that high yet, but that's just because this is the tournament where I made my leap. But during this tournament, I'm playing at a level pretty close to my peak, and Elo hasn't caught up with that yet. So, like, it's underrating me in this field. And if you just look at the rest of that field, like, how did it not rank higher? Well, it didn't rank higher because it assumed I wasn't that good at this point. And it probably was. This is not to build myself up. It's, I lost in the semifinals. I got crushed by Scythe Serenity. This is just to say this was a very, very good field. Then Rufus, eyeballing it, I'd probably have it a touch lower, but given that its score was so much higher than anything outside the top 3, I think the top 3 pretty clearly must, if not be the exact right top 3, be pretty close to it. The scores were just so high on those 3. And so I think eyeballing it, I'd probably have Irvine ahead of both Rufus and Triad Wars 8, but I do have some trust in the numbers I put together and that it must be capturing something there. So even if Irvine could be put ahead of them, they're probably in the top 5, right? And then Nanaki is just clear number 1. I think there's no argument against that. Nanaki is by far the best top 8 we've ever seen.